The White Bear Lake Fire Department has a rich history. We're going to hear how it all began and how it's evolved over the past 12 decades.
We'll also hit the open water and see how an ice rescue team prepares for emergencies and how 2 fire department members helped support Minnesota amputees.
I'm Tracy Minarchek.
And I'm Ron Hawkins. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Lake Area Beat. So Tracy, are you ready for warmer weather?
If it comes around, yes, I am ready for it. I was ready for it last month. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm totally ready for some summer, for some spring and some...
Spring would be nice.
Yeah, warmer
and early
weather.
spring. Remember a couple years ago, it was spring in February?
Yeah.
I think that'd be good about now. I'm tired of it.
Me too.
Standing on an iced-over lake isn't something everyone gets to experience, but here in Minnesota, we can count on it every year.
But ice is never truly safe, and the Ramsey County Sheriff's Department has a unit that trains in the water during the winter months. Take a look.
That ice is pretty thick.
Don't put yourself in a spot where you're risking your life or the life of someone else. If you don't know the lake, if you've never been on the lake, it's not a time to go out for a joyride.
Ice fishing is a pastime that helps many Minnesotans survive long winters, but nearly every year people die after falling through ice. 4 people died last winter, including a 9-month-old baby. The Ramsey County Sheriff's Department's Water Patrol functions as a rescue unit and conducts drills during winter.
If he doesn't respond, maybe he's frozen to the ice, maybe he's beyond response.
Deputy and diver Mike Servatka says rescuers must be ready when a call comes in. People who go through ice have little time before they lose dexterity.
So we have to respond quickly. We got to be ready. You know, you're looking at 5 to 10 minutes the minute you get the call that you have to get there and get in the water and rescue a person.
The suits divers wear are buoyant and cumbersome. It's hard to move around in and on top of the water, but they're warm and keep divers dry. In addition to emergency calls, divers are on site during special events.
We're in the hole at the Polar Bear Plunge in case there's that one person who might not be able to get out due to the cold. And we just want to ensure everybody's safety and have a fun event. I think everybody here will attest that we really enjoy working the Polar Bear Plunge.
Servatka says even though ice may be thick, there are still soft spots where cars go through. He says it's a good idea to call local bait shops or the Sheriff's Department to check thickness and danger spots. He says staying off during bad weather is also a good idea.
Like today, you can see the weather's pretty bad. The weather's bad, there's another reason not to be out there. You got a lot of people that like to ice fish and they kind of pick the wrong time maybe to go out there and they put themselves in danger.
Safety officials also remind people not to attempt pet rescue. Dogs can withstand cold temperatures far greater than humans, and they usually get themselves out.
The White Bear Lake Fire Department has a long and fascinating history.
Sarah Marcoux Hansen from the White Bear Lake Historical Society is here to share how it began and how it's changed over 12 decades. Sarah, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you start off with telling us how you researched the fire department?
Absolutely. The fire department is one of those organizations that sort of has grown obviously over the decades, and the records have been kept and maintained and grown with it. So it's a treasure trove of information. There was a book done in 2002, completed in 2002, that chronicled some of the history, and it was a nice place to start. Peter Reese wrote that and used a lot of, some of the records, frankly, more of the scrapbooks, and then the newspaper archives of the White Bear Press and the earlier papers to put that together. But the records that the department itself has, from photographs to actual logbooks and different things, were really instrumental in putting together a bigger picture. And there's always more of the story to tell, of course, too.
So when did it all start?
1888.
Just like it says on the fire trucks.
That's right.
Since 1888.
Even my little ones know that, which is kind of fun. It's one of those branding sort of things, but absolutely, it goes all the way back to 1888, and kind of kicked off with a bang and kept going from there.
So I need to ask, how did people fight fires before the fire department? And
Not
maybe
very well.
Not very well. And maybe that's why some of the changes. How did the
Exactly.
fire department start, or why?
Well, essentially, I mean, there really was no organized effort before that. Neighbors helped neighbors. It was literally sort of the image of a bucket brigade, if you will, and frankly, that's how the department itself started out, because they didn't have the technology and the tools that we have today, of course. But it was plain old water, and it was not a lot of it, and it didn't work. There were a lot of fires, and they did a lot of damage.
So how did the fire department adapt in the early years from having nothing and kind of a bucket brigade to starting out?
A good question. Frankly, having some organization of any kind, so literally getting more buckets, more people coordinated together was key, of course. And fairly quickly, they started to add things like horse-drawn pumpers and wagons and things to bring in. Now, one of the things that always kind of strikes me as entertaining is that in those early years, when they relied on horsepower, literally horsepower, to get them to the sites, they didn't have horses for the department. I mean, it was a volunteer organization like it is today, and whoever heard the call first and got there with their team, attached the horses, the pumper to the horses, and took off, and they got paid for that service. So it's kind of, again, it seems like this sort of comedy of errors, and it was a miracle that they were as successful as they were in the beginning.
So somebody from the fire department used their horses, or would they just steal somebody's horses that were close to the
It
fire
was kind
department?
of anybody, and usually the driver came with the horses. So it was, if you happened to live near the fire station and you heard the call go out, which of course was a bell ringing. Back in those days, it wasn't any pagers or anything technological, of course. They would come hustling because the money was decent. It was usually $1 or $2 for their time, which was a lot of money in the 1880s, 1890s. And it could be anybody from town, whoever was available.
So can you walk us through over the years, how the firefighters were alerted to emergency calls?
Sure. Again, it's sort of a miracle that they got there in a lot of the early years, but it started out originally, almost right away, they built a fire station right where the Domino's Pizza building is today, kitty corner from the library. So in 1889, I think that first building was completed, and it was a wood frame structure. They put a bell on top. They had a water tower out back, and they put a bell on top. And that first bell was replaced eventually by another bell that was a little bigger, a little louder. And literally, the bell had a different sequence for different things. They would call people to meetings, or they would call them to a fire call or whatever. But if the bell was clanging, that was the siren, if you will. And of course, you can imagine that didn't carry all that far, so you had to be close, you had to be available, and of course, even getting the message that there was a fire to the department to get the bell ringing was challenging. Then in the later years, they switched to a siren, much like our air raid kind of siren, which would carry further, of course, but again, you had to be somewhere where you could hear it and get back and respond. And it wasn't until the mid-50s that the telephone companies started to switch and things started to change, because before that there were actually a couple of different telephone companies in White Bear, so you had to be on both systems to get the calls, and it was really complicated. And so in 1954 or so, the telephone company came in with a system where initially firefighters would get notified, they'd hear the alarm, and they'd have to call in and get the call and find out where they were supposed to go. And then pretty quickly they switched it to, actually the telephone company started to call them. The operators would call the firefighters' homes, and they would have a system for notifying everybody. And then of course that went on for quite a while, and it eventually turned into the pagers and the systems that we know today that don't rely on the phone lines and things quite in the same way, and is obviously a lot faster for a response. But
I had to laugh because you still use different types of bells ringing for the different types of things.
Situations, yep.
It's different.
Yeah.
It's more technological now, but they
But it's
still
the same
have
concept.
the 3 different tones
yep.
that you guys have been using for 120 years.
Yeah,
Some things change and some don't. And when it works, You know, you need to know those things.
Well, I'm curious how things have adapted, and what I mean by that is, at what point did they decide, well, we need to go from horses to a steam-powered engine, or how do they determine, you know, I think we need another fire station, or I think we
Right.
need more trucks than just one? Is that pressure from the city council? Or?
A little bit. More pressure probably on the city council or the village council, depending on the time period, from the residents than anything. And much like it is today, you know, and again, a lot of things don't necessarily change. The White Bear Fire Department has not just served the village of White Bear or White Bear Township or the city of White Bear Lake or that sort of thing. It's been over the years and in obviously different places at different times, but it's been Birchwood, Delwood, the Bald Eagle area, which is part of the township, White Bear Beach, which is also part of the township. And those contracts sort of come and go, and negotiations have come and gone over the years. But it's an interesting thing because, of course, as you expand the area you're covering, you need more people, you need more equipment, you need more technology to be able to meet that. And it was fairly early on, 1914, 1916, that they started to move away from the horse-drawn vehicles, if you will, and get into some actual motorized vehicles. And of course, with that, as you can envision, if you look at the Domino's Pizza building and try to picture the trucks we have today, you know, Ladder 9 is not going to fit into the Domino's Pizza building.
Second and Clark.
Yes, at Second and Clark, exactly, yep. And so obviously things literally grew as the equipment grew and the needs grew. And so one sort of drove the other. And as the equipment expanded in the 1930s, for example, even the frame building that was originally where the Domino's is at Second and Clark, that was taken down, and a new modern, if you will, fire hall and city hall were built on that site, which is the brick building that's there now, to make more space for the equipment and that sort of thing. And then ultimately in the 60s, the fire department moved to its current Station 1 location just down 2nd Street on the other side of the highway by today's City Hall. And then, of course, in the 70s, with all of the development on the south side of the lake, it became difficult to really be able to protect that end of the community without having a fire station over there. So that's when Fire Station 2 came in.
And insurance agents, I understand, played some sort of part as to
True.
giving some pressure into.
There were a lot of things. Fires were incredibly common in those early years, those early decades, and often they were tragic, and they were out of control. A big property loss for that time period. But if you think about it, most buildings were made with wood, or built with wood. Most buildings were heated with fire. You know, whether it be wood stoves or whatever, or big boilers, depending, oil-type situations in the later years. And of course, cooking was often done with fire. And there just weren't, didn't have the technology, didn't have the fire extinguishers on hand to put out a quick fire or that sort of thing. Plus the fact that we were not fully a year-round community in those early years. There were certainly people who lived here year-round, absolutely a core part of the community who were residents all the time. But we were a resort community and a summer community, and so a lot of those buildings, a lot of those houses or resorts were left vacant in the winter months. And sometimes hobos would get in and build a fire to stay warm, or different things would happen, and then that would get out of control. And
So what would you say, unfortunately we're running out of time real quick.
Sure, of course.
But what would you say is one of the biggest changes related to the fire department in general, maybe firefighting, or related to the ambulance? Or
I would say certainly the technology and the shift that's taken shape and really started in the 1930s and continued dramatically over the more recent decades of the fire department switching from the firefighting to the medical services and the ambulance crew. That's been significant, and you know, I hear it all the time. There are far less fires. I mean, there are far more ambulance calls than there are fire calls these days, and of course that was the opposite back in the early days of the department. So.
And you said the switch started in like the 1930s?
As early as the 30s, it started to shift, but of course was not nearly as complex as it is today, and the training is tremendous compared to what it was back in those days.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show,
So we'll
Sarah.
have to have you back.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Good information.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, we'll tell you how to reduce your risk in getting scammed.
Hi, I'm Joe Cullen, host of Northeast Journal here on GTN Channel 16. Every month on Northeast Journal, we give you an inside look at the people and places that make up the Northeast section of the Twin Cities. On this month's show, we'll meet an area resident who recently auditioned for American Idol. We'll see how the Ramsey County Sheriff's Department trains on the ice, and we'll take a look back at some of our favorite stories. So be sure to tune in to Northeast Journal right here on GTN Channel 16.
Welcome back. Taxes are due April 15th, and if you haven't already filed your return, you may want to pay attention. If you're lucky enough to receive a return, you don't want a criminal to steal it.
Wiper Lake Sergeant John Vetty has some tips to reduce your chances of being victimized.
We're in the heart of tax season, and trust me when I tell you, identity thieves are working overtime on filing tax returns. Unfortunately, it could be your refund that they're claiming. An identity thief may use your social security number to get a tax refund. If you receive a notice from the IRS saying they received more than one tax return using your social security number, contact them immediately. Keep in mind, the IRS does not start contact with the taxpayer through email, text, or social media. If you get an email that claims to be from the IRS, do not reply or click on any of the links. Instead, forward it to phishing. That's phishing@irs.gov. After you forward the email to the IRS, delete the original email. Phishing is a scam typically carried out by unsolicited email or websites that pose as legitimate sites and lure unsuspecting victims to provide personal and financial information. After reporting the fraud to the IRS, specialists will work with you to solve the problem. Another issue to keep in mind is how you file your return. If you're filing electronically, do it from a secure computer. Don't use public computers or networks. And if you file by mail, make sure to mail your return in a secured mailbox and not your own. It's a good idea to have your refund deposited directly into your account. That way a thief can't steal it. And finally, just some basic preventative tips to practice daily, which include not carrying your social security card or any document with your number on it. Don't give a business your social security number. Check your credit report every 12 months. And secure your personal information in your home. Make sure you protect your personal computers by using firewalls and anti-spam software. Also update security patches and change your passwords. And don't give personal information over the phone, through the mail, or on the internet unless you've initiated the contact. For more information, go to the Federal Trade Commission's website and check out their Consumer Information section, or visit irs.gov. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns, you can always contact the White Bear Lake Police Department. We can't stop criminals entirely, but together we can make it more difficult for them.
2 White Bear Lake Fire Department members heated things up when it came to the Freeze Fest Team Challenge, which is a cross-fitness competition.
Yes. Melissa Mondo and Jeff Isaac scored first and third place in their 60-team division. The event is a fundraiser for the Wiggle Your Toes Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization for limb loss recovery and rehabilitation. So, congratulations on a job well done.
After the break, we'll tell you how the most common products in your home can be the most harmful.
Heroes come from small towns.
Our heroes from across the upper Midwest are coming home from wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Only now, some have a new battle to fight, unemployment. Hello, I'm Rocky Lynn, co-founder of Tribute to the Troops.
I'm Sergeant Dejan Farrell.
And I'm Captain Ron Jarvie. A survey of our troops serving overseas found 25% say employment is a major concern for them as they come home.
Right now, the unemployment rate for today's veteran is 12%. That's twice the average of others living here in the Heartland.
These service members learn quickly. They've experience with advanced technology and demonstrate teamwork, discipline, and leadership under difficult circumstances.
This year, Tribute to the Troops, the Armed Forces, and the Upper Midwest Emmy Chapter are asking you to hire our today's veterans. Employers, you've seen what these veterans have done for their country. Think Think what they can do for your business.
To hire today's veteran, visit positivelyminnesota.com/veterans.
Heroes come from small towns.
Stanley, what on earth are you doing?
Well, no, film,
Didn't you say you always wanted to be in pictures?
Well, yes, I did, but not like this.
Stanley, it's all about television nowadays. Look at this flyer I was handed at the high school game last night. It says you too can make TV. Volunteer with On Location TV 19 and we'll show you how.
Well, Ollie, what do you think that means?
Stanley, pick up that film reel. Oh. It means that if you volunteer with On Location TV 19, you too can make TV.
Well, Ollie, what kind of TV? Oh!
If you volunteer for On Location TV 19, you can cover high school sporting events, community concerts, parades, and much more.
Do you think that's why they had cameras at the game last night?
Why, certainly. That's why they had those announcers, instant replay, and all that modern TV stuff.
Ollie, do you think that I could operate one of those TV
Why,
cameras?
of course you could. The folks at TV 19 will show you how.
Ollie, are we still living in the 1930s?
No, of course not, you silly Willy. Why'd you ask such a question?
Well, then why are we in black and white?
That's what they call special effects nowadays. I'm sure if you wanted to appear in color, all you'd have to do is ask.
Can we be in color, please?
Most people don't know the items under their kitchen sink may be the most hazardous, especially to kids.
In recognition of Poison Awareness Month, we'll tell you what products are most dangerous and who to call when they've been ingested.
It's kind of like SpongeBob. There's an episode where all he knows is fine dining and breathing. All we know is basically breathing and toxicology.
Educational Director for the Hennepin Regional Poison Center, Kirk Hughes, has nearly 20 years' experience as a firefighter and EMT and understands the unique challenges first responders face when dealing with exposure calls.
I'd be on a rig and we'd be responding as a first responder to a kid who drank bleach or ate something, and we're pretty clueless. You know, we're like, oh, we're supposed to be the experts and calm everybody, but it's like ABCs is all we could do, you know? So we jump off and act all, confident and such, and I had no idea that I could call the Poison Center.
Hughes teaches firefighters, police, doctors, and clinicians in toxicology, which he says is an ever-changing field.
What a lot of people don't know is about 3/4 of the clinicians that are in an emergency department, when somebody comes in with a toxic exposure, they go in the back room and they call us. We're considered to be the experts.
In 2013, the center, which serves Minnesota and the Dakotas, received 51,000 calls from Minnesota residents alone. Most calls are related to hazardous exposures in the home, but can range from insect bites to food poisoning. And because of the service, most calls keep people out of emergency rooms.
But the real strength of our service is that 92% of those tens of thousands of calls that we get that originate from the home can be safely kept at home, which saves the whole healthcare system literally millions of dollars.
In 2010, Hughes says the Poison Service saved $23.3 million in healthcare costs. 47% of the calls to the center involve children under 6. Although most toxic chemicals aren't harmful in small doses, just one swallow of windshield washer fluid can be fatal if left untreated. Hughes says most serious outcomes with children happen when they're visiting grandparents. He reminds them to lock up their pill minders, which look like candy to kids, during visits.
So Easter's coming up right after Poison Prevention Week, and we want to make sure that the visiting grandparents or the ones being visited keep their medications away, safe, locked up, so that we don't have to get the call and say they got to go in, because it's going to ruin everybody's holiday.
Hughes says the center is also a great service for seniors who have questions about medications. The center, which staffs 28 people, is confidential, takes calls 24/7, and is free.
For more information on the Poison Control Center, check out their website.
March 3rd through the 9th marks MS Awareness Week, and the White Bear Lake Fire Department in particular supports one of its members who has multiple sclerosis.
MS is a disabling disease of the central nervous system that disrupts the flow of information between the brain and the body. It's believed to affect more than 2.3 million people worldwide.
And you do the MS Bike-a-thon. Is that what it's called these days? Bike-a-thon?
The MS 150.
Right?
Yeah.
And you did it last year and you're doing it again this year?
Yep, that's a fundraiser for the Multiple Sclerosis Society, and the fire department puts together a team. Last year we had a team of 4 people. We're going to do it again, and we're doing it in honor of one of our firefighter paramedics, Paul Munns, who has MS. The event is June 6th through the 8th.
No snow?
No snow at that
help.
point.
Hopefully you'll have more than 4 members on your team.
Yep, absolutely. It's looking as though we're going to have at least 6 now, and I think people had heard about the good time that we had last year, and so hopefully we're going to get more fire department members, and certainly their family and friends are certainly welcome to join the team. And it's a 150-mile bike ride starting in the Duluth area, and it ends in White Bear Lake.
At Century College?
At Century College, yes.
And if they want to find more information out, they can go to your Facebook page?
Yeah, I'm going to say that the best place would be, it's a special Facebook page for the MS 150, so it's the White Bear Lake Fire Department MS 150 team page.
Awesome. Well, that wraps up this edition of Lake Erie Beat.
We'll see you next time.